We're going to visit with you about CAPTA, if you want to pull that PowerPoint out. And CAPTA refers to the Child Abuse Protection and Treatment Act. This act was federally enacted in 2003. And what was important about this is that Health and Human Services, the Division of Protection and Safety, and the Department of Education at the federal level enacted this together. Thus saying to states, you need to work together to make this happen. And so it's state mandated for protection and safety and the Early Development Network program to work together. Protection and Safety has to initiate the referrals because they know the children that are coming in with substantiated abuse and neglect. And then the EDN program has to follow up to make those contacts to get consent for the evaluation and to begin that process. And that is easier said than done. And these people spend a long time trying to make connections to get that consent because they're also working with that timeline. And this is just for children birth to 3. The reason for CAPTA is that it was driven by research. And what research has shown is that approximately 50, and sometimes you see it's higher, 50% of infants and toddlers who have a substantiated case of abuse or neglect have developmental delays or disabilities. And then the other side of that coin is that we know through research that children who have disabilities have a higher chance of being abused or neglected.
With CAPTA, like she said, the Child Abuse Prevention Treatment Act, it requires and mandates at the federal level that every state is required to have a 100% referral rate of every child under the age of 3 that has a substantiated case of abuse or neglect. That referral must be made by Protection Safety over to the Early Development Network for all the reasons that we've been talking about today. It's very clear why they enacted that legislation. So even though it's 100%, for Nebraska, we are achieving about a 75% referral rate. Now the good news is on that is we have the highest referral rate in the nation, the highest percentage. So that is very, very good. Most states only achieve about a 20 to maybe 40% accuracy in referring. So we are very proud of the fact that we are achieving at least a 75% percentage rate on that, but we want it to be 100%, so keep going with it. What we have in your packets for you, and I think again I don't remember which side it was on, but there is some local level statistical information, and I will pull it out so you can see what it looks like, but it looks like charts like this. And what that's going to tell you is, depending on the counties, you know, our planning, we break things down by planning region teams like we spoke about earlier. They don't necessarily mesh real well probably with your judicial districts or with your protection and safety regions, but what we were trying to achieve here is we at least broke it down by county for you so you could tell in your area, in your county, in the year 2007, January 1 through December 31st of 2007, how many Child Abuse Prevention Treatment Act referrals were made, and how many of those verified for Early Development Network services or didn't verify, and whether the case is still open or closed, and if it closed, why that case closed. And you'll see on there sometimes a family moved from Nebraska, sometimes they were unable to locate the family, or sometimes the parent withdrew the child from the program, which speaks to what Joan was saying, that you couldn't get the parent to sign the consent. And we'll talk about some of those barriers later. But as Joan was saying, and as we've said earlier, again, why this is so important to you is that obviously the referral has to be made, and those services we described earlier are all going to happen within 45 days. So if you remove that child, make that referral right away within the next couple working days, because you know in 45 days after that, you're going to get a ton of information that you can have at your fingertips in preparing for court and what kinds of services and what kinds of assessments, in addition to what we've already provided. You don't have to duplicate a lot of your work, a lot of your time, a lot of your resources, because we're going to be able to have a lot of that information available to you. And because of all of those dynamics and all that philosophy behind it and all that collaboration between the two entities that needs to occur, we have established policies and procedures between Health and Human Services and the Early Development Network relating to practice and practical application of all of this.
And just to kind of look at your map, as Amy said, they don't fit so well, but as Kathy was saying what district was what county, North Platte Planning Team and Ogallala all fit in District 11, and then the Chadron Planning Region teams, Scotts Bluff and Sydney, all fit into District 12, if that gives you any help. What's unique and kind of creates this, creative tension is protection and safety is mandated to make that referral for CAPTA. But then you have Early Development Network, which is a voluntary program. It's family-centered, and families can choose whether or not to participate. So you've got something set up. These are different. Usually referrals come in to Early Development Network because someone perceives a delay in their child, the doctor and the family agree, and this is different. This is coming because it's mandated and the family hasn't really sought this out. And so this really is where that collaboration at the local level becomes so critical and important, that between protection and safety and the Early Development Network, that's what goes back to, I think, what Dr. Hall said, relationships. They have to be built and maintained, and there's turnover, but this is how you're going to help these families who are reluctant to engage at best.
So to continue on with what Joan was saying about these families that we all know very well that are reluctant to engage, here are some reasons, why, and we all know those, but we want you to know that we try to train our services coordinators in the Early Development Network around those family dynamics and about the reasons why they're reluctant to engage, and help them to come up with creative ways to interact with these families and to actually locate these families. So for instance, we train our people to understand that these families that are in the court system that have been identified by CPS and law enforcement as abusers, as perpetrators, of course they're going to be wary of any other agency or public provider. You can come in and say, I'm not with the state, but they're not going to believe that. They're going to know that everything they say and do is probably going to go right back to CPS. So they're going to be reluctant to even open the door for you. We train services coordinators to not make that first contact by mail or leaving a note on the door. These people, they don't take information in through print. They're probably not going to open official looking mail if you've got your little logo on it and stuff. They're not going to open that if that's the first contact they get from you. They're going to throw it in the trash. They're going to wad up that piece of paper and dump it. And these people are highly mobile. We all know they don't have stable living arrangements. They live with friend Susie, Uncle Joe, Aunt Sally, Grandma, whoever, from day to day to day. They've usually been evicted or can be evicted, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, trying to reach them through mail it isn't possible. Even probably going out knocking on that door is probably not going to be the right door that they're knocking on. We know that they don't have phone service, or the phone service is inconsistent. Their phone was just turned off, so they can't reach them by phone. So what we really try to train them to do is to, like we said, collaborate with protection, safety, the court partners, so maybe we can find out where these families are at this given moment and make that personal contact.
I just wanted to say that at some point, when a child has been placed in foster care, the school districts need to make a decision whether or not to appoint a surrogate, so that consent form can be signed and the evaluation can take place. And they rely on the service coordinator's documentation of attempts to contact the family. And there isn't really any hard and fast given reason what that documentation needs to be, but the school district's responsible because they don't want the child lingering just because we're trying to track down a consent form to be signed.
So really what we want to share with you today is really some strategies to overcome those barriers. If you've removed a child, and as a CPS worker, as a law enforcement agency, a child comes into care, you make that referral to Early Development Network. What we really want to promote today is immediate collaboration, immediate partnership upon the removal. So when you, as a worker, as a guardian ad litem, as a CASA worker, are thinking all these services that we need to be checking off for this family and all those referrals that you're making to therapy, to parenting classes, you need to start thinking about that referral to CAPTA. And not just the referral, you need to pick up the phone, you need to call the local office in the Early Development Network, find out who is assigned to that as a services coordinator, and talk to them. Talk to them about, here's the situation yesterday. Here's where we pulled the kid out of. Here's what it looked like. Here's the family dynamics. They don't have a phone. They couldn't live in that residence any longer, so they're staying with grandma. I know she's there. I just went over there today. I know mom's over there. Just all those things so that you can assess, so that this gives the services coordinator the ability to obviously make that contact, but then also gives the services coordinator the ability to assess their own safety. Are there safety issues if they're remaining in their own home? Are there safety issues for that services coordinator going out there? And if so, maybe it does require a joint visit between the CPS worker and the services coordinator to go out and visit with the family. The other thing you can do if the family is highly mobile, you don't know where they're at, CPS doesn't know, services coordinator went out and tracked down all the different areas they could be, they still can't locate them, then the services coordinator should be calling the CPS worker and saying, I can't locate them, you're right, they've kind of disappeared, do you think, when's the next court hearing? Well, it's Thursday at 9 a.m. Could I come to the court hearing 15 minutes ahead of time, meet with the family? Could you let the parents' attorneys know? Could you let the guardian ad litem know that I'm going to be there and I want to meet 15 minutes ahead of time with all of them to talk about my program and see if we can get the family to consent to this? The other thing that services coordinators can do is they could ask for when the next supervised visit is, and maybe they could come to the supervised visit and visit with the family about the program and get their consent signed, etc. Because really what we want, the goal is we want families to engage, we want them to participate, we want them to sign the consent, because it's not just about signing consent, but it's about talking to them about actively engaging in all those wonderful pieces of our program so that they're involved in these services just like they're involved in therapy or they're involved in going to that parent training class. Because in reality, and and I know this, I did it for years, they're going to get more out of engaging in this service than they are going to sitting in a parenting class for 3 hours. They're going to get much more benefit by sitting here, at least, they're going to be getting services on average at least once a week, if not more, actively engaging in the development of their child. So that's why it's just so important to try all those mechanisms to get those people involved. And we're telling services coordinators, use that court team. They are your partners. They should be helping you encourage the family, motivate the family in participating in these services. And like Joan said, bottom line is there's two other things that can happen. If parents are gone, you can't locate them, they're using meth and they've just split. We can appoint a surrogate, usually the foster parent, right away, if that's the situation. Or as a very last result, yes, it can be ordered as part of their court report and case plan too. But we just hope that we can at least get the engagement of the parents at some point, because our whole goal is to get those kids back home. And if they're engaged in the program at the beginning and learning all these strategies from the beginning, it's not such a shock because if they don't engage in that, but they engage in everything else and they get the kid back, but they haven't engaged in Early Development Network, then that kid is still going to suffer when they get back in their parents' home because their development is not going to be supported in their parental home upon reunification. What we always ask parents to do is to sign a release of information so that can be shared. However, now I can only speak for the counties. When I did CPS where I worked in, which was Lancaster County, when a child was removed, the judge ordered that all the educational records be shared and exchanged between all parties. So that immediately gave the right for us to just automatically share that with the caseworkers and the guardian ad litem, etc., whether or not the parent signed consent. But we trained our CPS workers and our services coordinators to, like I said, when they go out and sign the consent for services and get the parent engaged in that, to also ask them to sign the release, just so they feel like they have some involvement, they had some choice around that. But also as a backup, if they wouldn't, you've still got the court order that ordered the exchange of educational information, which that covers. And so that meant that this form could be released to the services coordinator, the services coordinator could release that to the CPS caseworker, who could then share it with the court parties. Well, I think it's confidential in the context of what I talked about. I mean, we couldn't share it beyond that. I mean, we can't even share it back with the child's physician unless the parent signed off on that. We can't share it with the daycare provider unless the parent signed off on that. So I hope that's making sense. But yes, there's some caveats because of the law that makes that confidentiality a little bit ambiguous at times. So I think we've touched on how the law around CAPTA can assist you, how our whole program can assist you, but like we said earlier, just to again hit it, we can share the multidisciplinary evaluation on the child's development with you as the court team. We can provide you with the individualized family service plan, which will show what all those family and child outcomes are. And like we said earlier, we want you to also be able to work as a huge team, because you're all serving these children. You should not be working in isolation. You should all be working together. And so again, these plans should very much complement each other. These families should not have two very separate plans that look very different and unique, because then there's something wrong. And these parents can't, they can't grasp that. These plans should really look very similar, so that no matter who they're working with today, no matter what they're doing in their daily routine, it's going to satisfy both requirements of the plans. He asked if any of our services coordinators are attending pre-hearing conferences. Can you guys speak to that? Have you been attending those? I didn't think so. We had a deal in Lancaster County when I worked CPS that every Wednesday morning we had our first hearing, was designated as our first hearing conferences or first hearings, and so we would always have a services coordinator from the Lincoln EDN office come at 10 o'clock and stay till 12 for that reason. And so again, it's another strategy if you want to implement that locally. If you have set days you have first hearings, and certain days that pre-hearing conferences are held, just let your local EDN office know, and they can certainly have a person come and be a part of those. But yes, we want to, you're right, we want to be a part of those pre-hearing conferences, because it just makes sense. We're part of your team and we can help you out so much. Well, I think it kind of depends on who's listed on the IFSP, and it's he wanted to know who we disseminate our reports to. And so obviously if you were able to come to the meeting and the parent said it was fine for you to receive a copy, you're going to get a copy. Like I said earlier, if you couldn't come to the meeting, but you let the services coordinator know or the CPS worker know that, hey, I couldn't come to the meeting, but I would really like a copy of this, that'll be the services coordinator's job during that meeting with the family to say, County Attorney so-and-so or GAL so-and-so wants to have a copy of this. Is it okay if I write their name down at the bottom here that says he can have a copy? And hopefully the answer would be yes. And then we can distribute it directly to you. But if for some odd reason, that all failed or the parent refused, then we would probably just give it to the caseworker to then disseminate to everybody, unless if you guys want to share something different on that. Okay, thank you.